Hello, and welcome back to the Alexander Society. I'm your host, singing a merry jaunt while I swab the poop deck, Derek, joined by my best friend and co-host, rotting away in the brig below decks, Tim. How's it going down there, Tim?
I guess not bad, but what the fuck's with poop decks, you know?
What's the deal with poop decks?
Dum.
God, we're so not funny.
Yeah,
Yeah, how you doing, Tim?
I'm doing pretty good. Just had my first 5 a.m. shift in like maybe a year.
Oh, gross. Ah, that sucks.
I was a little bit late, but fuck it. It didn't go bad at all.
Yeah, I think the fact that it starts at 5 a.m. is bad enough. I don't think the universe is going to inflict any more on you after that.
It's food stamps day, my guy.
Oh, no. Okay, well...
So it's usually one of our most stressful days. Like first, fifth, and 10th are some of the most stressful days of the month, and we didn't do bad at all.
That's good. That's good at least. So, had a doctor's appointment today.
How'd that go?
Got my prescription restarted on Adderall.
Yeah, Addy Club!
This is the first time I've ever had a doctor, like, actually sit down and talk to me about ADHD and, like, actually go through, like what it should look like to get, diagnosed and treated for it. And come to find out, whoever did my diagnosis when I was, 15 completely fucked it up.
Love it.
Yeah, I just had a either a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I don't know what the fuck, but
I think it's psychiatrists because I think that's who I still see.
it's whoever can prescribe, whichever one can.
I'm pretty sure it's psychiatrists because I see mine like it was originally every 2 months, then she stretched it to 3, and now they're going like 4 or 5 because my last appointment was in June and it's not till November is my next one.
Ugh.
It's just a 15-minute call. Are you doing good? Is it effective? Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Well, basically, what he told me was like, yeah, what should have happened was you should have been sat down and gone through like a multi-hour long evaluation to like pinpoint exactly what the fuck is wrong and talk about how to fix it, and then you should have been going to therapy alongside the medication. You shouldn't have just been taking the medication. Yeah. So Tim, what are you drinking tonight?
So I got home and I was like, I do not want to go to a liquor store. So I've used these people once before, and I was like, hey, they do liquor deliveries. So Primo's or something like that here in Tulsa. But I was looking at it. I searched up sours. I don't think this is technically a sour, but it's from By All Means Brewing. It's got this really sick, like, mechanical honeycomb kind of looking label on it. And it's an Aqua Fresca pineapple. And it's from Billings, Montana, interestingly enough. Which it is. In the meantime, I got for my liquor this week, I was like, you know what? I haven't had a rum in a hot little minute. I was looking around and I was like, ooh, vanilla rum sounds good. So,
God, it does sound good.
I can't tell if this is supposed to be Blue Chair Bay or Blue Chain Bay, but it's a vanilla rum premium blend, and it is 26.5% alcohol. I went ahead and got it looked up, so it is a fruited sour, so it is a sour, and it is 4.2 ABV.
So what I'm drinking tonight is I've got some more stuff that you gave me. Just working my way through that. I got Nothing's Left Brewing Company, Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's Mangonada. It's the mango sour beer. Yeah, I know you weren't a huge fan of it. I really like it. It just tastes like mango juice, but with alcohol in it. And it works for me. I like it.
I think it's because I'm getting the tahini a little bit more than you are. Because I'm not a big fan of tahini.
That's fair. I don't know. I just like it. It's like a...
About the only thing I love tahini on, it's literally the only thing, is if you just cut up some cucumbers and throw tahini on there, it's fucking delicious.
I'm not entirely sure what tahini is, actually.
It's like a Hispanic seasoning. I don't know what it is either, but it's like they throw it on a lot of shit.
Is that where the kind of like, it's not spicy, but it has a little bit like spice flavor on the other underside of it?
Do you ever see those yeah, you ever see like a red ringed like margarita? It's that.
Okay, I've never had that, but I know what you're talking about. Anyways, Mangonada, 6.5%. I like it. It's pretty good. I'll probably go back to it.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Hey, that's pretty good. For my shots, pulling out American Honey from the makers of Wild Turkey. From the Oscar award-winning creators of Wild Turkey. It's
Yeah, sure. Like Wild Turkey deserves a fucking Oscar.
it's basically just a honey whiskey. It's 35.5%. Haven't had a chance to try it yet, but I like honey liquors, so I'm holding out some hope for it.
I don't get a lot of the obviously the whiskey flavor is there, but it tastes closer to a liqueur for me.
So you want to get into the rules?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so here in our illustrious society, we abide by an ever-changing set of rules. Rule number 1, every time our subject gets a new ship, we're going to take a sip.
Every time a name we recognize pops up, 3 sips.
3 sips. And rule number 3, every time our subject is an enormous piece of shit. Like, just the worst person you've ever heard of in your whole life. What are we going to do, Tim?
We're gonna take a motherfucking shot.
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 Prost.
Cheers.
So, Tim, what do you know about the U.S. Navy?
In the Navy.
You get to sail the 7 seas. Yes, they are all gay, that is true. But what else do you know about them?
That pissed them the fuck off. I don't know hardly shit about that either. You know that music video pissed them off, right? Even though they were fully aware of how gay the song was going to be ahead of time.
That's what you get with the Village People. Like, what do you expect? It's the Village People.
They were upfront as they could be like, hey, this is going to be gay as shit. You're going to be known for being the gay burns to the military because of this. They're like, okay, you can record on our base or on our ship. And then they're like, we didn't know you were going to make us look gay.
Well, what the fuck were you expecting? It's the Village People, you idiots. God, why are sailors so dumb? Fuck these guys. Tim, what do you know about John Paul Jones? Before I started doing this research, all I knew was that one famous quote about him and the song by the Longest Johns. It's a song about John Paul Jones from the perspective of the British. And it's called John Paul Jones as a Pirate. It's really good. You should look. I'll send you the video after we record. It's a very good like sea shanty type song.
I know not any of these.
A little like, it's about an American an officer in an American branch of the U.S. military service. It was gonna have some.
You thought you were gonna find out about a cool badass.
I thought there was gonna be some bad shit, but I thought we'd also get like some badass shit battles, which we do get one. We do get one good moment in the story, but he gets, especially like when I was looking up research for this guy, about half, without exaggerating, about half of the biographies written about this guy have the word hero in the title.
What?
This guy is a fucking monster. This guy is an asshole of the highest degree. It is.
And that's curving it for what we call our military heroes nowadays?
Yeah, like, he was an asshole even by the standards of the time.
Awesome.
Like, imagine all of the worst flaws of, like, American military officers during the Revolutionary War, how they were all just fucking hated each other and were constantly, like, trying to ruin each other's career and talking shit to each other to the Continental Congress. Imagine that, but magnified like tenfold.
Damn.
I kept repeatedly, like, and the big shocker, like, the real, like, giant fucking asshole cherry on top really just comes at the end, too. Just like the big, like, why don't people talk about this kind of thing comes at the very end. So, anyway.
Also, what stage of capitalism is scented lint rollers?
That sounds like some shit they'd make in the 50s, actually. That sounds like the high point of capitalism, actually.
Scotch-Brite has come out with Fruit Loop scented lint rollers.
Healthcare, please.
I mean, I would prefer healthcare over, like, fucking Fruit Loop scented lint rollers. But, whatever.
Anyways, let's get into it. So,
let's get right into the history.
Yeah. So, crime number 1 of this guy, he was Scottish. Disgusting.
Derek just dropping the casual racism.
Never casual racism against anybody who doesn't deserve it. The Scottish, though?
The Scottish deserve it. Okay.
Not as much as the English, I'll give him that. But he still comes from perfidious Alba. What am I gotta call it out.
One of your historical ops.
I think most of Europe are my historical ops.
Derek time travels, sees anyone that's white. You're my fucking op.
Let's go on the fucking list. So, on July 6, 1747, a Scottish couple in the coastal town of Arboglen, in an area called Kirkcudbright on the west coast of Scotland, awful names, they gave birth to a baby boy.
Very much so.
This baby boy, first mistake.
First mistake. Having children.
This baby boy they named, first mistake having children. They named this boy John. John Paul. Not much is known about his childhood, as is usual for this show. But we do know that he began his career as a sailor at the ripe old age of 13. Anyways, so yeah, it was actually pretty common for kids to a boy hits like 13 years old and his parents go and send him off to become like a deckhand on a merchant ship, because.
So what you're saying is this was the real life equivalent of, hey, you turned 10, here's a Pokemon. You're 13, go live on a ship, bitch.
Yeah, except instead of a Pokemon, it's smallpox.
Or scurvy. It's not an either or. It's you're getting one, sometimes the other, too.
Yeah, so the reason that they did this in both like the merchant fleet of like the early British Empire and the later British Empire as well, but also in like the Royal Navy, is because you didn't need to be a full-grown adult to do a lot of the stuff that they needed done on a ship, like you did in like the Army.
And you didn't have child labor laws.
And no child labor laws, and rank was based on seniority. So if you started when you're 13,
the children, they yearn for the ships and the mines.
Yeah, the children yearn for the sea. The waves beckon, and the child labor laws must be abolished. Like it's just nature. But yeah, so think about it. If you get started when you're 13, by the time you're 23, you've got 10 years of experience. So you can rise up the
missing half your teeth,
but by the time you're in your late 20s, you can be getting up there in like rank and seniority, and you can be getting some pretty cushy jobs. And so you had a lot of naval officers at the time that were like pretty young, like in their 20s and 30s, compared to like commanders in the British Army would have been like in their 50s and 60s. And so you get command really young in the Navy and in the merchants, and then you get, with a high rank, you get a lot of money, and then you get rich early, and then you can retire early. So it's a good investment to put your kid on a ship at 13 at this time.
Assuming you live,
yeah. Which
you fall off the ship, get boarded, all that kind of shit.
Yeah, you might fall to some pirates. You might get caught in a storm. You might catch a disease that doesn't exist anymore. You might get some sort of weird infection from never having showered for like 6 months. You get one splinter and then you lose your arm. It's rough. It sucks. Yeah, somebody in the Royal Navy in the late 1700s once, or it might have been, I can't remember when it was, but he described being on a ship as like being in prison, except the people are worse.
I mean, yeah. It's like being in a wet jail cell.
Yeah, except work is harder and the food is worse. So he got to work as an apprentice aboard a merchant ship called the Friendship. That was his actual name. His first ship was the Friendship. Don't think about it too hard.
I was about to say that's gay.
He picked the Friendship because this ship often made trips across the Atlantic to trade at ports in colonial Virginia, which is where his older brother William had already built a home and settled down in the town of Fredericksburg. And so whenever they made the first leg of their trip, when they got to Virginia, he didn't have to spend money on like a boarding house. He could just go and stay with his brother. So it saved him some money, which is smart. So as he grew older, he became a more experienced sailor, and he began working on a number of different ships. In 1764, at the age of 17, he received his first command as the third mate aboard a ship called the King George. Unfortunately, the King George was a slave ship.
Fuck! That's a sip because that's the new ship.
If you want to call it...
Was that his first ship, or would we...
Yeah, the friendship was his first one. Now he's on the King George.
So that's 2 sips, because we didn't do one for the friendship. Now King George.
So yeah, he spent something like 6 months aboard this ship, made a couple trips, and then basically like going to East Africa, buying a bunch of enslaved people, and then taking them over to Jamaica. That was basically what he did. After, I'm sorry, not a few months, 4 years.
Shit.
He was on this ship for 4 years, and then he returned to Scotland. And according to him, he disavowed the slave trade altogether and called it, quote, an abominable trade. Which, you couldn't have figured that out in like the first couple weeks you were on that ship.
It took you 4 years?
It took you 4 years to figure that out? I mean, good, but like, God, you took your sweet time about it. And I don't think he was even... I couldn't find anything about his opinions on slavery in general. He just thought the slave trade itself was bad, which was not an uncommon opinion even amongst people who supported slavery at the time.
I mean, it sounded pretty wasteful for how they got it here, but slavery itself was wasteful because they threw people's lives away left, fucking, and right and center.
Yeah, but it was still cheaper than actually paying people. So that's... I don't know.
Here's the smart idea. Maybe you get better ROI if you're not constantly throwing people the fuck away or treating everything as disposable.
Yeah, here we go again. 2 white guys talking about the economics of slavery.
At least we're the ones saying it was still fucking stupid.
Yeah. You know, you don't have to hand it to slavery, but...
Derek, just don't let those words ever cross your lips ever fucking again.
So, in 1768, he moved to a different ship. This ship was called the John. It was just called the John. He was on a ship called the Toilet.
All right, level John, huh?
Right, what, John?
Level. I'm just trying to make a dumbass joke.
So, in 1768, while he was basically like the third in command on this ship.
By the way, I recommend having a cat when recording podcasts, training them to sit in your lap and while you pet them because you feel like an evil villain while recording.
So during this voyage aboard the John, the captain and the second command both died of yellow fever, and so he ended up having to take command, and he safely returned the ship and all of its cargo to port in Scotland. The owners of the ship were so grateful for saving the ship and the cargo, and basically saving them from financial ruin, that they named him captain of the ship at the age of 21, as well as paying him a bonus equal to 10% of the cargo on the ship.
Damn.
Suddenly making him, like, very financially comfortable, like, suddenly skyrocketing him to, like, the top 10% of, like, wealthy people in basically all of the UK.
Shit.
In 1770, he was leading a voyage aboard the John to the West Indies when it was revealed that one of his sailors was plotting a mutiny over a disagreement about wages. So, I couldn't find a lot of details about this disagreement. I'm inclined to believe the disagreement occurred having something to do with he said he was not going to pay them. That's what I'm suspecting. And so as a result, he found out one of his sailors who was upset about this was going to mutiny. And...
Killed him?
Technically, yes. It was considered manslaughter. But he did have the sailor flogged. And then the sailor died of infection a few weeks later.
That sounds about white.
So, as a result, when the ship returned to Scotland, he was arrested on the charge of manslaughter. This was strange because normally a sailor dying from a flogging was kind of par for the course on British ships at the time. It was so routine that nobody like really even considered it to be murder. They just considered it a hazard of the job. Like, yeah, sometimes you're gonna fuck up, you're gonna get flogged, and you might die from it. It's just a part of the job.
So what you're saying is they were just being dicks and threw the book at him?
Well, the reason they were being dicks and throwing the book at him was because it turns out the man who had died was the son of a wealthy landowner.
Ah, he killed a bourgeoisie, and they're like, fuck you!
Yeah, and he had joined the crew in order to live out a fantasy about being an explorer. He didn't do it for the money, he just wanted to go traveling.
The fuck?
And then he tried to start a mutiny, and then he met the...
I bet you he didn't even have a good reason for a mutiny. He was just a rich bitch, and he was like, let's start a mutiny.
I don't know. I don't know. I was thinking that when I first started reading about John Paul Jones. By the end of reading about him, I'm like, I look back at this, I'm like, I bet he probably had a point.
Could be.
I bet Jones had done some fucking rancid shit with their paychecks.
Oh, that's just par for the course. That was a hazard of the job.
It was actually like it was very common for captains to just skim off of their sailors' paychecks. That was regular occurrence.
That was just another part of the job.
Yeah. So this man who died, his father used his influence in order to have John Paul arrested, and effectively destroying his reputation as a captain, at least in Scotland. He would never end up making it to trial, though. He got out on bail, and then he fled to England.
Coward!
So he basically he was on the same island, he just went a little further south, which at the time basically made you disappear into thin air.
I mean, it was back. It's just like the Wild West. Hey, I'm wanted for murder. 2 towns over. Now I'm not.
Yeah, this is when they're like starting to use dowsing rods to find bodies. They weren't good at investigating. I'm sure they found water. I very much doubt that it was because of the dowsing rods. So yeah, he never made it to trial. He fled to England, and he convinced a shipping company to give him command of a ship heading to Tobago, an island in the Caribbean. This was aboard a ship called the Betsy.
So that's another ship. Ship. A ship.
So on this first voyage as captain of the Betsy, he got into a dispute with a sailor over wages.
Heavens to Betsy.
Heavens to Betsy. that was good. This time he just skipped the flogging and just killed the guy with a sword.
So he went from indirect manslaughter to full-on murder.
Yeah, so you're can you kind of see like why I'm kind of gonna give the first sailor who died the benefit of the doubt?
Yeah.
Do you think this is piece of shit material?
Yeah. No.
This was just a murder in cold blood over money.
You wrote it said enormous piece of shit. That's just par for the course of the day.
No, it wasn't. Like, this was actually not par for the course. Like, flogging a sailor, that's one thing. Sometimes they die from that. That's par for the course. Pulling out your sword on deck in front of your entire ship and stabbing a guy through the chest is not par for the course. That is murder.
Okay, I guess it is.
And that was legally murder in England, where he ended up being tried. All right. Prost.
Cheers.
Yeah, I really want to emphasize killing one of your sailors with a sword over a pay dispute was not normal. That was very much not normal in maritime practice in England at the time. It may seem like that because of all of the other horrid shit they put up with. Outright murder was still a big no-no. So yeah, he ended up getting arrested and charged by the Admiralty Court in London, which was a problem because the family of the first guy that he killed had a lot of friends in the Admiralty Court. And so not only did he just murder a guy, but
he killed another guy with friends in high places?
Basically, yeah. Yeah, well, all of the friends in high places were now we're now overseeing his trial for murder. So
yay!
So instead of, facing trial, he just found a ship and he fled to the Caribbean. So from this point, there's about an 18-month...
That was a sip, by the way.
Yeah, that again.
You said he got a new ship.
Technically, he didn't get this ship, he just rode on a ship. But, if you want to count that, I'll take it.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say no to an excuse for another drink.
So at this point, there's about... he leaves England, and then we have no idea what's going on with him for about 18 months.
So the guy drops off the map for a year and a half and is like, fuck it!
Yeah. There are 2 scenarios that most people kind of claim. One that I think is more likely, and one that a lot of other people like to claim, which would sound like something he would do, but I don't particularly believe it. I think the more likely one is that he went to Tobago, and he just worked some odd jobs under an assumed name and kept a low profile for a little bit until the heat was off of him.
Yeah, I can just chill out for a year and a half until my murder charges cool down.
Yeah, pretty much. And then the second thing that people claim, specifically from like English people, for British people, they claim that during this time he was pirating. They claim he found a pirate ship and joined the crew and went pirating for a little bit.
Love it.
I could see him doing that. I don't think he did. Because I think that if he had been... Because pirates, were still a pretty big deal. They got a lot of...
Basically, it would be more concrete if he did.
I think if he had, we'd know better like what he was actually up to during that time. Because there would have been legal records.
Gotcha.
But after 18 months, he ends up popping up back in the record when he's back in Fredericksburg, Virginia, because his brother has just died. And his brother was unmarried and had no kids, and so he was the next direct heir.
Interesting.
And so his name starts popping up in documents, basically like accepting his will and managing his estate and things like that. We think that he'd probably been in Virginia.
So he popped back up for free money, basically.
Free money, yeah. Like he'd gone from like a fugitive to, now I have like a house and a little plantation now.
Ooh, money!
Which, I didn't think about this before. It was a plantation. It was a small plantation, but it was a plantation in Virginia.
So slaves.
I'm guessing there were probably
most
slaves
likely
on it, yeah. Although he did end up becoming friends with a lot of prominent early abolitionists, especially like the founding fathers from the north that were abolitionists, like from Philadelphia and Massachusetts. He was kind of closer to their circles than he was any of the founding fathers from the South. It is possible he might have been an abolitionist. It is possible he might have also owned slaves because he owned a plantation in the South. I'm not really sure. There's not concrete evidence. But yeah, he pops back up in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and we think he probably had been there for at least a little bit, making friends with like some local prominents who had known his brother, because it was on these documents as he's settling his brother's estate that he starts using the name John Paul Jones, using Jones as his last name. And the best theory that I've seen for where it came from is that while he was living in Virginia, he became friends with a guy named Wiley Jones. And they were so close that when he assumed a new name when he got to America, he decided to just take his friend's name. And then Wiley Jones would later go on to become a representative.
I'm saying this to mock him because it would probably hurt his feelings. That's kind of gay.
Yeah, it's a little gay. But yeah, Wiley Jones would go on to be a representative of North Carolina in the Continental Congress and one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Anyways, so yeah, he not only has Jones now become friends with like Wiley Jones, but he started to become friends with a lot of like guys that will end up becoming like prominent revolutionary figures here in a few years. He especially ends up making a lot of friends in Philadelphia. He spends a lot of time up in Philadelphia doing business, and he becomes really close friends with a guy named Joseph Hughes, who's another guy that would end up in the Congress. And Joseph Hughes introduced him to Benjamin Franklin.
3 sips.
3 sips.
Also, I feel like out of all the founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin is supposed to be the biggest nerd, but also he probably fucked the most.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because back then, in order to be a nerd, you had to fuck a lot. It's just the culture of the time.
He really liked France.
You had to fuck a lot, but you had to fuck a lot in a really weird way. And his really weird way was that he hated young women. Which, handed to Benjamin Franklin, we could say with some confidence that he was not a pedophile.
He was not a pedo.
He might have been a creep.
He is not our current president.
He is not our current president, no. He was incredibly into old women.
How old?
Depending on his age, but he generally just like older than he was. so it would kind of change as he got older.
So he was into cougars.
Yeah, and then by the time he's in his 80s, like it becomes like Slim Pickings. He still found a way.
Jesus Christ, Benjamin Franklin!
Hey, Versailles is a magical place. You can find anything that your heart desires in Versailles. So this few years that he spends living in America, this is the first time he's like really actually living in America. Like he'd spent time in America before, but this is now he's in it. He's absorbing it. He's kind of becoming a part of it, and he absolutely falls in love. He loves America, and he very quickly becomes like a red-blooded patriot, which is coming at a good time because red-blooded patriots are now about to free this country from its bondage from the yoke of British tyranny.
I mean, he's known as one of our founding fathers for a reason.
Yeah. He's the water-based founding father. He's the water-type founding father, like the Gyarados of founding fathers, if you will. I don't think Gyarados
Derek,
ever.
You give me fucking migraines sometimes when you try and make references like that.
Brain hemorrhoids. So he ended up becoming a militant of the Patriot cause as tensions were growing between the 13 colonies in Britain. By 1774, he had settled down permanently in Philadelphia. He still owned the property in Fredericksburg, Virginia, but now he was, he had some capital. He could build up a business. He could afford to, go and live permanently in Philadelphia, where all of his new friends were. And so in 1775, after the battles of Lexington and Concord, the Continental Congress approved the formation of an organized military for...
No, that's not for kiddies.
Uh-oh. What do you get, is it?
He was sniffing the rum.
Oh, give him some rum. Just a little tiny bit.
You're getting a wedgie next time I see you.
Gotta catch me first.
I will take you at the fucking knees.
So yeah, the Continental Congress approved the formation of an organized military. Primarily, this meant the formation of the Continental Army, for whom there were a number of experienced officers who could lead it, most notably George Washington. But for the Continental Navy, that was a different story. For one, the colonies didn't really have their own warships. They had a few, like individual colonies had their own small navies for defending trade from pirates and stuff like that. But they just didn't have enough to really stand a chance against the Royal Navy. And so what they ended up doing was just basically like buying a bunch of merchant ships and then strapping as many cannons into them as they could. And they called that a navy. So that was the Continental Navy. Bitches do love cannons. That is true. For another thing, they did not have a lot of experienced naval officers in the colony. So, which was kind of weird because they did have a lot, like, their economy was mainly based on, like, maritime trade with Britain. So they had a lot of guys with with sailing experience, but specifically, like, war, like ocean warfare. They did not have a lot of those guys. And so John Paul Jones, even though he had no naval experience at all, he was one of the most experienced sailors in the colonies. And so he immediately offered his services to the Continental Congress, and he was commissioned as a first lieutenant of the USS Alfred on December 7th, 1775. That is another new ship.
Sure, hire the goddamn guy who's on his way to becoming a serial killer on his ships.
Also, he became distinguished as the very first American sailor to raise the American flag over an American naval ship.
Yeah.
Although at the time it was like the original American flag, which was the 13 stripes with the British cross, basically like the British flag in the corner and then the 13 stripes. So it was that one, so it doesn't really count because it's too English. So fuck you, Jones. I was ready to give it to him before I got further into the story, but... So, his first mission was a quick jaunt over to the Bahamas, where he and his crew raided Nassau in order to secure gunpowder for the Navy before getting chased off by a British ship. They did get chased off, but they did get a lot of gunpowder, so technically came out of victory, even though strategic victory, tactical loss. When he returned, he was given command of another ship, the USS Providence. That's another ship.
Ship.
The USS Providence was supposed to be a temporary posting, because at the time, the Continental Congress had just approved of the construction of 13 new frigates, which were one of the larger types of ships. And they planned on making him the captain of one of these larger ships. And these were supposed to be like big, fancy, state-of-the-art, like, could actually...
Fuck off size ships.
Yeah, like, could actually, like, put him...
For the time, obviously.
Yeah, like, the types of ships that he was sailing right now were, like, 12-gun ships with, like, a single deck. A frigate would be, like, 2 decks and have, like, 44 guns.
Every day I learn more layers on how H.P. Lovecraft was a fucking bigot.
Why are you reading about H.P. Lovecraft?
I'm just scrolling Facebook and H.P. Lovecraft just popped up there. Supposedly, he wrote one of his big tales, The Shadow over Ismount, after learning his great-grandmother was Welsh. Great-grandmother was Welsh.
That is how he dealt with like racial fears, isn't it? Was he just write a story about a bunch of people getting scared by some strange monsters?
That he was too lazy to actually describe.
But that's where the horror. I shouldn't make fun of that. I actually. Really
I mean, I quite
Lovecraft.
enjoy Lovecraftian horror. I'm glad he's dead, so now I don't have to worry about any of my money going towards him. But like, yeah.
You know what's really funny is that near the end of his life, like after his mother died, he started to he started to come out of his shell more, and he spent less time indoors and started making friends and stuff. And he was like,
Are you saying H.P. Lovecraft was a fucking NEET?
Oh, 100%. He lived most of his adult life in like a 1-bedroom cabin being taken care of by his mother without any interaction with the outside world. That was most of his adult life.
So he's one of the history's most successful NEETs. Awesome.
Yes. Yeah. And then his mom died. He came out of the house, started making friends, and then in some of like the last letters he ever sent in his life, he was talking about like, all that racism I did when I was younger was really fucking dumb. I wish I hadn't done that.
So what you're probably saying is he's probably just like forced to stay in his room by his mom and just perpetuated her views, and once he actually got out of the nest, he actually became a whole person. Oh my god, who would have guessed?
Yeah, but the problem was he didn't become a full person until he was like 44. So some of the last letters he ever wrote in his life were like, all of that racism stuff I did when I was a kid was really dumb. I hope everybody else who's racist grows out of it like I did. And then he died at the age of like 46.
That would fucking suck.
You know how much I would fucking pay to read some of Lovecraftian work, like after he realizes that racism is bad, and see how
post-racism
Lovecraftian works. I would kill to find out what that looked like.
I would kill to have someone educate him on describing monsters.
Because so much. Well, that was the thing though with his like the reason that he was so like allergic to like describing the actual monsters and the actual horror part, and because he built the horror out off of what he understood as being scary, which was stuff that he couldn't comprehend because he'd lived his entire life in a house. And so he thought that shit that he couldn't comprehend because he didn't have any experience with was the most terrifying shit in the world.
So this is more like that Lovecraft was more similar to like those kids who get locked up by their parents for forever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what he was. Like, you lock up a kid, you raise a kid in complete isolation until they're like 30, and then you teach them how to write and see what they write. And you get Lovecraft out of it.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why you should not homeschool your kids.
Yeah, but then we wouldn't get Lovecraft out of it, and I really kind of like Eldritch Horror. I don't know, I haven't read enough of it. I really like the aesthetic. I need to read more of it.
I haven't read it, but I've listened to like recordings of it, like audiobooks basically. And like it feels more like a synopsis most of the time than it is like an actual story.
Oh, yeah.
Like it feels like he was too scared to dive into his world and world build.
Yeah, I can. So yeah, he was. So John Paul Jones, his posting to the USS Providence was supposed to be temporary because they were about to be building these frigates, and he was supposed to get command of one of them. So in the meantime, he spent a few months just kind of escorting cargo ships, and during one of these escorts, he spent some time raiding Nova Scotia. This was his first actual victories. Was he went on a raid on Nova Scotia, which is kind of what put him on the British Navy's radar. This is when they kind of start watching out for him. Okay, this guy's actually fucking up some of our fishing settlement. It's not a bunch of damage, but this guy could. We got to keep an eye on this one.
So it wasn't the murder. It was the, hey, he's messing with our trade routes.
I don't know if they even care about the murder at this point because it.
Probably fucking not.
No. So at this point, Jones is shaping up to be a pretty promising naval commander. Unfortunately for Jones, he had a very abrasive personality, if you couldn't have guessed.
No fucking shit.
Yeah. And he didn't get along with any of his fellow officers. Particularly, he never seemed to get along with his commanding officer, the Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Navy, Commodore Essex Hopkins. Which, if Hopkins was alive today, it would chafe his ass so bad to know that he isn't considered the founder of the U.S. Navy. That this fucking asshole is. Even though he was the first guy to command it. Anyway. So, as a result, when the time came for promotions, instead of being given command of one of the Navy's shiny new frigates, Jones was reassigned to the USS Ranger, which was a tiny little 18-gun sloop that had just recently been captured from the British. And so basically he was being demoted instead of promoted. Unfortunately, his actions are going to make the Ranger one of the most famous ships in the history of the U.S. Navy.
God damn it.
Yeah.
Why is it always the pieces of shit that do cool shit in history?
Especially this one. This guy might be one of the most undeserving guys to ever hold the title of hero. So, Jones was pretty mad, but he still had a job to do, and so his next assignment was to... Basically, he was going to sail off to France, and his standing orders were basically, do whatever you want, just as long as it helps win the war.
Obligatory fuck the French.
Fuck the French, but my heart's not in it in this story, because... Whatever, they're not the antagonists of this story.
Oh, no, not with the story. Just general case, anytime they come up, we need to say fuck them.
Yeah, in general. This is for Mother Algeria. So, at the time, there really wasn't much that he could really do besides... He went to Paris, he went to Versailles, and he hung out with Benjamin Franklin for a few months. Because what's one sloop going to do against the bulk of the entire Royal Navy? One of the strongest...
I wonder how many French bastard kids Benjamin Franklin had.
I don't know, because most of the women he was having sex with were postmenopausal, so...
Holy shit.
That's not even a joke.
I hate how that's a serious consideration we have to have.
Yeah, that's not even a joke. That's just actually, he just loved old women.
You can't get them pregnant if they're already past pregnancy age.
So yeah, he's hanging out in Versailles. He's barging into Benjamin Franklin's room while he's having naked chess in a bathtub with a 90-year-old woman. And then in February of 1778, France finally agreed to ally with the U.S. More importantly, France offered John Paul Jones a bunch of ships in order to give him cover while he went to go fuck up the Brits.
I mean, anytime you can fuck with the Brits, it's a good day.
Yeah. If that was all that John Paul Jones had ever done with his life, A+ in my book, that's fine. God, they call this guy a pirate all the time, and he's just not that cool. So he did a little bit of raiding in the Irish Sea. He'd go after some like smaller merchant ships, which was annoying, but not like a big deal. Um,
I'm still convinced that if you ever watch One Piece, you'll lose your life and you'll just watch it all. You're not going to be able to stop because you're going to love it.
that might be why I'm avoiding it.
Like, I'm not kidding, Derek. If you get far enough into One Piece to like actually get all of the anti-government shit, you're going to be like, shoot that shit right into my veins.
Yeah, that's a big if though. That's the issue.
Well, he literally his first major villain he defeats is a corrupt naval officer who is using his power to abuse an entire town.
So yeah, he went raiding in the Irish Sea a little bit, and then he went to try to raid the British town of Whitehaven, but at the last minute his crew got cold feet, and he had to turn around. He picked Whitehaven specifically because that's where when he was 13 years old, he boarded his first ship. That's when his naval career, his sailing career started. And he held a grudge against Whitehaven because it was in Whitehaven that they tried to try him for murder. So he just wanted to get back at Whitehaven. But then at the last minute, his crew threatened to mutiny, and so he turned around, kept raiding in the Irish Sea. And then they went over to the coast of Ireland, where they heard from some captured sailors that there was a British sloop, a Royal Navy sloop, that was anchored in a town. I can't remember which town it was, called the HMS Duke. So he went and he...
You're a Duke, Harry.
He went... What the fuck does that even mean?
You know that first part from the first Harry Potter movie where Hagrid goes, "You're a wizard, Harry." I'm just fucking with it.
Yeah, no. I get, yeah, okay. Anyways, they tried to attack the Duke, but at the last minute, so part of their attack plan was to come up on it really fast and then drop their anchor at the last second in order to stop them so they could turn the ship and then start firing on it. They fucked up the timing of the anchor, and it dropped too early and they were too far away. And so they just raised the anchor back up and bailed.
Fail.
Yeah. And so then after this, he somehow convinced his crew to go and attack Whitehaven again.
He somehow got them to go at it again?
Yeah, so they went and they tried to raid Whitehaven. The raid was a complete clusterfuck. This was a complete clusterfuck. It was it was just a bad operation from the very start, is all I can say. He leads 2 boats, like 2 dinghies filled with 30 guys total, to the shore around midnight, with a plan to burn all... Whitehaven was a decent-sized port. At the time, there were about 400 ships docked in that harbor. Not all of them were like full-size ships. A lot of them were just like small, like coastal merchant ships. There were a lot of coal ships and stuff like that. There were a few big ones though, and he wanted to just burn all of them.
Burn it to the ground.
So, on the way there in their tiny little boats, trying to get to shore, the current turned against them and started pushing them backwards. And so they had to start rowing against the current, which put them back.
It sounds like divine intervention.
Maybe that's what the people of Whitehaven would say. And so they ended up having to like row against the current, which tacked another like 2 hours onto their timetable. And then they land on shore. They capture the coastal batteries, which are just the cannons that they have kind of set up to defend against like naval raids. And they spike the cannons, which is basically they just poke a giant hole into the side of the cannon so it can't fire properly. And so they spike those, and then they go and they try to set fire to the ships in the harbor. But when they get over there, they realize that the lanterns they were going to use to set the fires were out of oil. because it had taken them so long to get to shore. And so Jones told a few of his sailors, all right, go to the local pub and raid whatever lantern oil that you can find and bring it back here. Tim, when a bunch of sailors are raiding a town that they basically feel like they basically have like carte blanche to just steal whatever they want while they're there, and they go into a pub full of unsecured alcohol, what do you think happens?
They get drunk as shit.
They get so fucking wasted, they just go into that pub and they disappear for hours. Hours that they're not getting the oil.
I bet he was so mad. I bet he was fuming.
And so Jones and his sailors are just kind of standing at the dock waiting for oil to arrive.
They're sitting there with their dicks in their hands wondering what's going on.
Yeah. And so all of these delays meant that by the time they started setting fires, it was already dawn. And by this time, the sun was coming up, everybody's waking up. Most of the town already knew by that point that they were being raided. And so by the time they actually start setting fires, the townspeople are coming out with like fucking muskets and shooting at them. And so they immediately abandon their mission, get back on their boats, and hightail it back to the Ranger. And so the townspeople are able to put out the fires really quickly. So it basically just didn't do any damage. And then they went and they tried to use their coastal batteries to try and fire onto the Ranger in order to sink it. But they had spiked it, and so they couldn't fire on the Ranger. And so Jones and his crew were able to get away. And that's the story of the only American invasion of British soil to take place during the Revolutionary War.
Are you fucking with me?
Nope. And in fact, it is the only American invasion of the British Isles in all of history. The only time an American has ever set foot on British soil as an act of war. Yeah. Whitehaven pardoned John Paul Jones in 1999. And now...
Hundreds of years after his death.
Yeah, and now the United States Navy has a permanent, like, diplomatic base in Whitehaven.
Because fuck it, why not?
Yeah, fuck it, why not? Because genuinely, like, a big part of Whitehaven's identity today is just telling people about John Paul Jones, because it's the only interesting thing that ever happened in that town. So, John Paul Jones is undeterred, so he hatches another plan. This time...
But of course...
This time, he was going to sail up to St. Mary's Isle, off the coast of Scotland, specifically off the coast of Kirkcudbright, which is where he's from. And his plan was to go to St. Mary's Isle and capture and kidnap the Earl of Selkirk. And he was going to hold the Earl of Selkirk hostage in exchange for the freeing of impressed American sailors. Do you know what impressment was?
Forced naval servitude?
Yeah, basically. The British still considered Americans to be British citizens or British subjects, and so they believed that it was they still fell under British jurisdiction, which allowed ships to just basically like if they find an American sailor who is not on board a British ship, they could just say, you're serving in the Royal Navy now, and just kidnap them and force them to serve.
Sounds like the British.
Yep. And so that was basically Jones was planning on kidnapping the Earl of Selkirk and offering him in exchange for the freeing of American impressed sailors. And so the Ranger went, and when they got to St. Mary's Isle, it turns out that the Earl was not even home. He was on the other side of the country.
How did this guy even get a big name? It sounds like a failure after fucking failure.
But one thing, literally just one thing, and we're going to get to that in just a minute. So instead, when they got there, the Earl's wife, the Lady Selkirk, basically invited Jones to dinner.
Did he cuck the Earl?
No. It was nothing like that. She invited Jones in and basically like negotiated with him over dinner because she was like, well, he's here to kidnap my husband, but since my husband's not here, he might try to kidnap my son instead. And so I'm just going to negotiate him to make sure that doesn't happen.
I mean, fair, I guess.
So she does successfully convince Jones not to kidnap her son. And so Jones decides to cut his losses and he leaves in peace. But before he's able to leave, his sailors start getting mad at him because they thought that they were going to be there to pillage like a big rich palace. And now they're going to be leaving empty-handed.
They're mad there's no rape and pillaging. Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. And so Jones was basically had the choice, like, let these guys rob these people blind, or I have a mutiny and I might get killed. And so he was like, he basically like compromised with his sailors. He went to the butler of the Selkirk mansion and basically said, hey, get something valuable and let me take it, and then we'll leave in peace. And so the butler was like, all right, and got him like a big, very expensive silver dish set, and basically just a bunch of silver dishes, the silver plates, and gives it to him. And they're like, okay, that's all good. He gives it to his men, and they're satisfied. They hop back on the Ranger and leave. A few years later, when he was back in France, he would find those same plates on sale in Versailles, and he would buy them and then mail them back to the Lady Selkirk with a letter thanking her for her hospitality.
That's cute.
That would be very classy if it were coming from a different guy. I really don't want to give this guy credit.
Oh, he's 1,000% piece of shit.
So, this was just a failure. He didn't accomplish what he was trying to do. So, he decided to set back off to the Irish coast, where he heard that the HMS Drake was back. And so he decided to give it one more try to get the HMS Drake. He engages them, and after an hour-long cannon battle, the captain of the Drake was killed by a cannonball, and the ship surrendered. And Jones has captured his first ship as a naval commander.
How long has he been a naval commander at this point?
Oh, like a year and a half.
Not horrible, not great.
Yeah, it's like, maybe like, this would be like, okay, yeah, this is 1778, so, yeah, like 3 years. Which, considering the size of the U.S. Navy at the time, and considering that this was in Britain's backyard, this was a pretty big deal, actually. Capturing a British Navy ship in the Irish Sea was very, very close to home for the British, and they didn't like it. They really didn't like one of their coastal towns being raided by Americans. They really didn't like one of their ships getting stolen. That was a very big deal. They did not like that. And very quickly, John Paul Jones was starting to become...
Well, back then, Britain was like what America is now. They were the big dick in the locker room.
Not quite. They were one of the big powers at the time. They were not quite the dominant power. They wouldn't become the dominant power until like the mid 1800s. At this point, France was still a bigger deal, and honestly, Spain, but they were already on their way out. But Spain owned like 80% of the Western Hemisphere, so like, I don't know, So yeah, this great victory, it really helped furnish Jones's reputation as a great American hero. And this was in large part because he's a huge piece of shit. So a big part...
I mean, that's how a lot of American heroes really were. Is they're actually just a piece of shit that got a big name.
Yeah. One of the big masterminds of this plan to capture the Drake was his second in command, Lieutenant Thomas Simpson.
I was gonna. I don't know why. Every time I hear lieutenant, I can't help but go, Lieutenant Dan, you ain't got no legs.
Lieutenant Dan. I'm here to get my sea. I'm here to get my sea legs, Forrest. But Lieutenant Dan, you ain't got no legs. I know that, Forrest. So this guy is the second in command of the Ranger, Lieutenant Thomas Simpson. A lot of the sailors on board the Ranger kind of say that the ship ran less like a naval ship and more like a privateer ship that was under the command of Simpson. And so a lot of the sailors on board kind of considered Simpson to be the guy in charge, and Jones was kind of just a representative from the Continental Congress. That's how a lot of them kind of saw it.
So what you're saying, he was in charge in name only.
Kind of. It's really unclear because we know a lot of these ideas were his idea, but it's not clear like how much command he was actually exerting over his sailors. And so it's strongly theorized that Simpson, if not being like the mastermind behind the capture of the Drake, was at least like instrumental to the success of the operation. And Jones knew that, and so he had Simpson court-martialed for insubordination.
Sounds about right.
And then when they got back to France, he had him locked up in the brig of the Drake while he went to Versailles and schmoozed with a bunch of dignitaries and furnished his own image.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, he's such a piece of shit. God, he's such an asshole. Simpson would never actually make it to court-martial because when John Adams found out, who was, one of the big names in the Continental Congress and the future second president of the United States, he found out and was like, oh no, we're not doing this shit, and immediately had the Congress pardon Simpson. And so he was allowed to go free.
He's like, no, fuck that shit.
Yeah. Is that 3 sips? That's a John Adams right there.
I believe it is. Yeah.
The capture of the HMS Drake was front page news back in the U.S. In 1778, the colonies were on the back foot in the war. They suffered several major losses, including New York City was occupied by the British. And while Washington and the Continental Army were retreating from New York, they accidentally set fire and burned down half of New York City. And then a little while after this, Philadelphia, which was the capital of the acting capital of the colonies, was also captured and occupied. And so the U.S. was on the back foot at this point, and a lot of people in the Patriot cause were very demoralized. And so even a small victory like this was able to blow up into a huge morale boost. And Jones ended up leveraging his sudden popularity in order to get a promotion. And so in 1779, he took command of a 42-gun frigate built out of a large merchant ship that was sold to the U.S. by a French merchant. And Jones named this ship the USS Bonhomme Richard. And this is complicated. I'll explain where that name comes from. He named it in honor of his close friend Benjamin Franklin. Because Bonhomme Richard is the French translation of Poor Richard, as in Poor Richard's Almanac. So in French it's Bonhomme Richard. Poor Richard. And so Poor Richard's Almanac, it was written by Franklin. That was his most famous work in France and in the U.S. And so he named it the Bonhomme Richard in honor of Benjamin Franklin. That's another sip too. They don't name ships in the Navy like that anymore.
Thank fucking Christ.
Yeah, they just give like their giant fuck off carriers shitty names like the George H.W. Bush. The USS John McCain is a fucking nightmare. Like that's a ship. A name like that is just begging to have a plane crashed into it. I swear to God.
Are you volunteering, Derek?
I mean, I'm not volunteering. In August of 1779, the French and Spanish hatched this batshit insane idea to send a giant naval armada to invade Great Britain.
I bet you... No, I haven't, but I bet you it didn't go fucking well.
Yeah, the reason you haven't heard of it before was because it didn't go well. The plan wasn't actually to occupy Britain. It was only to divert Britain's attention and supplies away from the American theater of the war. And so the Armada would end up never setting foot on British soil because before they could do anything, 8,000 guys died of disease on their ships. 8,000. They're right there. They're right there. It took less than a week to sail from Spain. Sailing. You're laughing really hard at 8,000 guys dying.
Because it was obviously preventable because they're fucking dumbasses.
Like, there had to have been some insane incompetence going on there because...
That's why I'm dying laughing, because that had been so fucking preventable.
It takes less than a day to sail from France to England. How do you lose 8,000 guys in that time?
That's why I'm dying, Derek!
How did this happen? It takes like less than a week to sail from Spain to Britain. How do you... 8,000! So, anyways, that hasn't happened yet. That's not important to the story. What is important to the story is that John Paul Jones's job on board the Bonhomme Richard is to divert parts of the Royal Navy on a wild goose chase in order to open the way for the French and Spanish ships to reach Britain. So, the Bonhomme Richard and 6 other ships set sail for the Irish Sea and basically played nanny nanny boo boo with a bunch of British ships.
Nanny nanny boo me.
Yeah, so they're like, go up next to a British ship, fire a couple shots, and then just fucking hightail it north, and then just let them chase you all the way around. They go around up north over Scotland, then they start coming down the east coast of the island, and then the British ships catch up to them. And they catch up to them at a place called Flamborough Head on September 23rd, 1779. If you look up the name Flamborough Head, it is considered to be one of the greatest, maybe not one of the flashiest or biggest victories, but one of the greatest victories in the history of the U.S. Navy. And so, a little after 7 p.m. on September 23rd, one of the big frigates that's chasing against the Bonhomme Richard, called the Serapis, caught up with the Bonhomme Richard and started opening fire with a broadside. After only a few minutes of cannon fire, it immediately became clear to John Paul Jones that his ship was not going to survive this battle. Like, very quickly. The legend goes, though the story has never been confirmed, and it probably didn't happen, but this is what this is his big famous line. During the cannon fire, it's reported that the captain of the Serapis shouted at Jones to surrender, and Jones is said to have replied, "I have not yet begun to fight." That didn't happen. He has a much cooler line a little later that actually has eyewitness corroboration.
Nice.
But we'll get to that in just a second. So after he's purported to have said this line that really didn't happen, Jones then ordered the Richard to turn and come up right next to the Serapis while the Richard was actively sinking. So he came up right next.
God damn.
Yeah, he came up right next to it, and once they were right up close, the Marines on the Richard opened fire with muskets and deck guns at point-blank range, just about 10 feet apart from each other, and immediately, within like 10 seconds, like 24 sailors and Marines on board the Serapis were dead. Yep. And then after that, a brutal shootout ensued that would continue to kill shitloads of dudes on both ships while while they just kept getting blown apart by cannons. They were shooting at each other at point blank range. Other ships that they were with were shooting at each other, and shooting at the Serapis and the Richard.
So it was a great big clusterfuck, is what you're saying.
It was an enormous clusterfuck. It was a fucking nightmare, and this lasted for like 2 hours. And so, at some point in the fight, some stray shots caused the American flag, the ensign, to fall off. And in naval warfare, striking your color, it was referred to as striking your colors, where you would lower your flag, was a universal sign of surrender. That's basically telling the other ship, stop firing, we surrender. But it was shot off by accident. They hadn't intended to surrender. And so the British captain saw this, and he shouted at Jones while they're trying to kill each other, asking if Jones had struck their colors. And this quote actually has multiple eyewitness accounts from his sailors. He actually did say this.
So this is truly, and it goes hard. This is true, and it goes hard.
And it goes way harder than that other quote. He said, quote, I may sink, but I'll be damned if I strike.
Fuck yes.
I hate to give him credit, but man, that's great. That goes hard. That's pretty good.
That's pretty hard. That's pretty hard. I'll drink to that.
So, right after saying this, one of the American Marines made an absolute clutch trick shot with a grenade that fell down a hatch into the Serapis's lower decks. And when it went off, it blew up their powder magazine and blew a giant hole in the side of their ship.
That sounds like the naval equivalent of a 360 no scope.
Yeah, it basically was. It just a complete lucky shot, like lucky throw. And the Serapis was immediately immobilized. It could not do a single thing to maneuver out of the way. And so the British captain realized that, and he was like, oh, well, shit, now we're all going to die if we don't surrender. So he struck his colors, and he offered his surrender to John Paul Jones.
I'm kind of surprised Jones would accept that. He sounds like the kind of prig who'd be like, no, fuck you, go die.
No, at this point, he was not wanting to be shot at anymore, and he wanted to capture this ship really bad because this would be amazing for his career. And so that's exactly what he did. He accepted the surrender, and he captured the Serapis, which was basically this was the single greatest naval victory of the Continental Navy of the entire war. Like, this was the greatest achievement of any naval commander in the entire Revolutionary War. Just hands down. Nobody even came close. Capturing a 42-gun British frigate off the coast of the British Isles in their backyard. Nobody else could do anything like that. And that's where Jones's reputation comes from. Unfortunately, the Bonhomme Richard was too damaged to save, and it did sink. So they lost the Bonhomme Richard, but they got the Serapis. So the Battle of Flamborough Head was huge news, both in Europe and America. In the U.S. and France, John Paul Jones was hailed as one of America's great heroes. Like, he was already considered a hero before this, after the capture of the Duke. After the capture of the Serapis, he's the hero. Everybody loves him. Everybody adores him. He is the greatest shit to ever come out of America. They love him. So, anyways, the Battle of Flamborough Head was huge news, both Europe and America. In the U.S. and France, Jones was hailed as the great American hero. King Louis XVI...
Sure, American hero for that. Yeah, hell yeah.
King Louis XVI knighted Jones. He was knighted by the King of France. And so just to give you an idea of like how much this stroked his ego, for the rest of his life he would sign every single letter as Chevalier John Paul Jones.
Why is it the people who are always going to be like fucking stupid about using the title knight or sir are the ones who get it, and the people who would be like chill about it and kind of deserve it never fucking get it.
Oh, because people who are chill about it and never fucking deserve it don't believe in nobility?
I mean, it would be cool to have the title Sir, but I wouldn't be like a fucking dick about it.
Yeah, you know what I would,
I would do. It would be the same kind of thing. Like you just like if it comes up in conversation, like, oh, I'm an Eagle Scout kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like, what if I signed every single one of my work emails as Derek Peace Eagle Scout?
Yeah, that's the same kind of shit.
Like all of the professors have like their PhDs and all of their degrees and certifications, and then mine is just like Derek Eagle Scout.
I think it would be more like when you have like a degree where you shorten it. I think it would just be like ES or Eagle.
Yeah. Now, in Britain, they had some conflicting ideas about how to feel about Americans. A lot of Brits, particularly Whigs, which were like more or less kind of the liberal party at the time, they sympathized with the colonies, even if most of them didn't support the revolution. Most Brits kind of looked down on Americans as, uncultured colonials who had the temerity to revolt against their betters. George Washington, for example, they didn't like him because he was a rebel and because they kind of saw him as like a colonial hick. He was a backcountry kid. But they also begrudgingly respected him because they kind of saw him as like a very honorable military commander and officer. So Brits had kind of had like a, kind of mixed feelings because a lot of them were like, yeah, I guess they kind of have a point, but most of them were kind of like, oh, those ugly country bumpkins don't know their place anymore. Regardless of who you were, where you were on the political spectrum, what part, like social strata you came from in Britain, you fucking hated John Paul Jones. John Paul Jones was public enemy number one in the United Kingdom. They despised him. They hated him with every fiber of their being. To the average Brit, Jones was the nastiest, most wicked pirate to sail the seas since Blackbeard. He was universally derided as a scoundrel and a murderous thug. So if nothing else, we can respect Jones for making the right people hate him, for what that's worth. You do not, in fact, have to hand it to ISIS. So, Jones became a war hero, but eventually the war would end, and so he would be out of a job. So after the war, he started shopping around for a new commission so he could keep fighting in, any navy that would take him. And eventually he got offered a job as a rear admiral in the Black Sea Fleet of the Russian Empire. And so he left France to go and serve Catherine the Great in the Black Sea, fighting against the Ottoman Empire. And you know what's crazy is he did really well. Like, he won a number of, really big major battles against the Ottoman Navy. Usually he was, vastly outnumbered. Like, he'd bring, 20 ships, and he'd be fighting an Ottoman Navy that was, 100 ships. And he would just, play his cards right and manage to, funnel them into a kill zone and stuff like that.
Hell yeah.
The problem was, once again, he had a very abrasive personality, and now he was in the Russian Imperial military, which is nothing but abrasive personalities.
Exactly.
There is no point in time, at any point in the history of the Russian Empire, where every single military officer you meet isn't the biggest fucking asshole you've ever met in your life. And so, ironically, he fit right in. The problem was he was too much of a sailor and not enough of a politician, and so he couldn't do as well in the cutthroat politics of Russian military life, because they weren't just fighting battles and fighting for career advancement. They were fighting for the affections of the Empress Catherine the Great. They were fighting to get her attention, because that's how you got that's how you got advancement, social advancement, promotions, things like that. And everybody knew Catherine the Great had a little bit of a soft spot for foreigners. And when I say soft spot, she liked to fuck foreigners. We talked about one of them. I forgot his first name, but his name was De Miranda from our Simon Bolivar episode.
3 sips.
I'm about to mention another name. I don't know if you've heard of this name before. I had, so I was intending to include it in the rules, but I'll let you be the judge of it.
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to equally apply to us, so if you recognize it, you can still sips.
But one of the big reasons why he wasn't able to advance very far in the Russian Navy is because his immediate commander, like his immediate, like, above him in the chain of command, was Rear Admiral Prince Grigory Potemkin. You haven't heard of him? Okay.
I have no idea. But you have.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and sit for it. Yeah. So, Grigory Potemkin, he's pretty well known on his own because he was a pretty decent naval commander, which in the history of the Russian Empire makes him one of the greatest naval commanders in their history.
Damn.
Because they're not exactly a naval country with a strong naval tradition. But he was kind of more famous as, like, a really powerful, like, political figure within the court of Catherine the Great. He was a very duplicitous person. He was very good at, like, backroom dealing, and he was very influential in the court, and that's kind of what he was famous for. What I knew him for is because he had a very famous battleship that was named after him, the battleship Potemkin, which was very famous as, like, one of the starts to the Russian Revolution of 1905 was the revolt of the crew of the battleship Potemkin. Yeah, which then later on was turned into a movie by Soviet filmmakers called Battleship Potemkin, which it became one of the most influential pieces of cinematic art in all of human history. It's one of the most famous. It used it invented a lot of filming techniques that are still used in, like, modern cinema today. And that's what I knew the name Potemkin for. It wasn't for the guy, it wasn't for the ship that the guy was named after, it was for the movie that was named after the ship that was named after the guy.
That's the most nerdy explanation you've done in a while.
So his superior was Grigory Potemkin, who was a legendary wheeler and dealer, and so he pretty handily just drove John Paul Jones out of the Russian naval service. And his career stalled out, and so he kind of left in frustration. And this is the shit that I really dreaded, like, talking about on this episode coming up right here. Before he left Russia,
what the fucker do?
He was arrested and tried in St. Petersburg because of a rape accusation that was made against him.
Cut his dick off. I know he's dead for a couple hundred years. Cut his dick off.
By a 10-year-old girl.
He was on some Epstein bullshit?
Yeah. And this isn't just a matter of, like, oh, we don't really know for sure because of the historical record. There were multiple eyewitnesses that corroborated her story. Like, that placed her in the room with him, in the same clothes that both of them were wearing at the time that she claimed it happened, and then reported seeing her leaving his house with disheveled clothes and hair, with a black eye, bleeding from her nose, and crying.
I know he's dead, but let's just go kill him.
We need to kill this man. Do you know what his defense was at trial?
Some variation of the bullshit temptation one? Or she wanted it?
Kind of. He said it wasn't rape. He paid her. Yeah.
Whatever level of hell this man is in, it's not enough.
It's not deep. They're not levels deep enough in hell for this guy. So, I really need to emphasize, it wasn't uncommon to marry younger than we'd be comfortable with back then. A lot of people like to exaggerate it, though. It was common to get married at like 16 or 15. That was relatively common, and even then, these would be like marriages of convenience, and they wouldn't actually like consummate the marriage until she was older. That was common. What wasn't common was having sex with a 10-year-old. That was not common. It was not accepted.
It better not be fucking common anytime.
It was never common in any part of the world at any point in human history. It was not normal. It's never been like respected. It was not the times. This destroyed his reputation. At trial, Catherine the Great person. Yeah, here's the fucked up part. I found out while reading. I mean, not the fucked up part, but a fucked up part. It turns out that he wasn't technically supposed to have been arrested because the complaint that she made had a statute of limitations of 24 hours. Because anything beyond 24, if a woman waited to report a rape after longer than 24 hours, it was considered to be a sign of consent. She waited a couple days. And so technically he wasn't supposed to be arrested. Catherine the Great, the Empress of Russia, personally intervened to make sure he got arrested and put on trial.
Fuck yes!
You don't have to hand it to an empress.
But this one time I'll give her a pat on the back.
But this one time I'll give her a nod. Like, yes, that has to happen. Which apparently was pretty common. She was one of her big things that she was known for was intervening in trials where she believed that a woman was at a disadvantage, and she'd kind of help tilt the scales towards the women. That was something she did pretty common, and this was one of those times. He was not sentenced to prison or anything like the one sentenced to Siberia or anything. Basically, Catherine told him, leave Russia and never return.
I don't like the get out and never come back, because that means they can do it again somewhere else.
Yeah, that's the issue. I also wish she had cut off his pension, because he was still being paid a pension from the Russian Navy.
Why the fuck would you not... Hey, you just committed rape on a fucking baby. You get no money from me ever fucking again.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why that happened, but... But yeah, the trial was very public, and it was very big news in Europe, and it utterly destroyed his reputation across the continent.
Fucking good.
Did not destroy his reputation in America, because very few people heard about it.
Fucking, of course, because Americans love their pedophiles. They got one in the White House right now.
Yeah. And so he would never be able to find work in any navy again, and he would end up settling down in Paris. Yeah, he settled down in Paris, where on January 18th, 1792, he died of a kidney infection at the age of 45.
Not painful enough.
Not painful enough, no. Now here's the real fucking sick shit up next. He was buried at the Saint Louis Cemetery in Paris, which was a cemetery that was owned by the King of France, or had been previously owned by the King of France, but, you know, by this point he had gotten his head cut off, and so now he was allowed to be buried there. Then later his remains were exhumed, and they were repatriated to the U.S. in 1905.
I would have told him to fuck off. We don't want the bones.
His body was escorted by a giant detachment of like eight ships, including like 2 battleships. And he was placed in a custom-made bronze and marble sarcophagus. And now that sarcophagus with his body in it is on display at the chapel at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland.
Bro doesn't deserve to be on display.
He deserved to be tossed in a ditch.
Bro deserves to have his bones be at the bottom of an outhouse.
So today, John Paul Jones is remembered as one of the great American heroes of the Revolutionary War and is considered to be the spiritual founding father of the United States Navy.
That sounds like the kind of shit that makes sense that Americans look up to. Because, like, why wouldn't they?
He is less well known for his selfishness, his ruthlessness, his self-promotion, his hypocrisy, and, of course, his child rape. And you know what? Maybe he should be.
Of course. Why why do we care about anything else than the fact that he raped a fucking child?
A 10-year-old. A 10-year-old.
I'm just too fucking angry to just get, like...
And it was in his he was in his navy whites, his dress uniform. Anybody in the U.S. Navy should feel like physical revulsion at the idea of wearing their uniform if this is the guy that they idolize.
I guess that tells you like what kind of people our military are in the Navy. If they look up to this fucking piece of shit.
So I'll go ahead and tell my sources. It's kind of hard because I had to pick through a lot of information for this episode because most of the sources, like I mentioned to you before we started recording, without exaggerating, about half of the biographies that I've found that have been written about John Paul Jones has the word hero in it. Every single biography I found about this guy was just sucking his dick. And I had to piece together the worst shit by just kind of like offhand references that they made to like his worst personality traits. And kind of like...
Because they always make excuse for the rapists.
And yeah, and kind of corroborate them. And then a bunch of them did not even mention his child rape trial. And so, okay, so the main source I used was John Paul Jones, A Sailor's Biography by Samuel Eliot Morison, which was the most objective one I could find, and even that one sucked his dick.
No, they're dick suckers. Of course it's not going to be objective.
Yeah. So, any final thoughts, Tim?
This man is not suffering enough in whatever afterlife he's in. That is all.
I was so excited for this episode. I thought this was going to be a fun episode. I hate this guy so much. Genuinely the most personally unlikable person we've ever talked about on this show.
Don't worry, I'll let you know if I find the time machine. We'll go kick his ass.
I think this guy has jumped to the top of the list for guys that...
No, he's stop one.
Yeah, stop number one for when we get the time machine.
We're fucking up the timeline so much if we get a time machine.
What can I say but...
Fuck this guy.
John Paul Jones is a pirate. No loyalty does he possess. So, Tim, where can they... I should probably...
Where can they find you?
Yeah, I should probably give mine first. They can find me on Visigoth. The O is a 0 at Visigoth. On Blue Sky, the O is a 0. Tim, where they can find the good stuff?
They can find me at Tim A.K. Otis on Blue Sky, and they can find the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at the Alexander Society Pod. Alex Society Pod on Blue Sky, and Alexander Society on TikTok. And if they've enjoyed what they've listened to, they give us a rate review on their streaming platform of choice, and we will see you next time.
Bye.